Count the defeats. A failed store that left him in debt for 17 years. A lost race for the state legislature at 23. A collapsed engagement and a depression so black his friends removed the razors from his room. A single term in Congress that made him so unpopular he went home. A lost Senate race at 45. A humiliating vice presidential bid at 47. Another lost Senate race at 49 against the most famous politician in America. 2 years after that last defeat, the same man was President of the United States. Elected at the exact moment, the country began to tear itself in half, with less than 40% of the vote and 7 states already walking out the door. His name is Abraham Lincoln. This is the story of the most productive loser in political history, and of what he understood about defeat that his rivals never did. He was born in 1809 in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky, to a farming family that moved whenever the land or the law turned against them. His entire formal education, added up, came to less than 1 year. Everything else was borrowed books read by firelight. Aesop, the Bible, Shakespeare, a life of Washington he paid for with 3 days' labor after rain ruined the copy he had borrowed. A word about that world, because it explains his method. The American frontier had no credentials to give, no schools worth the name, no old families, no inherited rank. What it had instead was an open microphone, courtrooms, stump speeches, debating clubs, where a man was measured entirely by whether his argument stood up. Lincoln trained there like an athlete, walking miles to hear lawyers argue, rewriting other men's points more clearly, learning Euclid's proofs in his 40s as a sitting congressman just to know what airtight logic felt like. The polish was homemade. The logic was not optional. It was the only currency he had. Now run the loss list again, but this time read the fine print, because every defeat left a deposit. The failed store. The debt took 17 years to clear, and paying every cent of it earned him the nickname Honest Abe in a region where men routinely skipped town on creditors. That nickname was worth more than the store ever was. The lost legislature race at 23. In his own precinct, where people actually knew him, he took 277 votes out of 300. Proof the product worked at close range. It just needed distribution. He won the next time. The lost Senate seat in 55. He released his supporters to elect a rival rather than let a pro-slavery man win. And the men he released remembered who had been graceful under defeat. And the famous loss to Stephen Douglas in 58. 7 open-air debates against the best debater in America, transcribed by the new wire services and printed in every paper in the country. He lost the seat and won the microphone. He edited the transcripts into a book himself. The book made him a national figure. Losing, done his way, was distribution. Then he won the only race that mattered, and did something winners almost never do. Every serious rival who had fought him for the 1860 nomination, men who considered him an uneducated accident, he put in his cabinet. Seward, who assumed he would run the government from the State Department, and wrote Lincoln a memo in week 1, proposing to do exactly that. Chase, who never stopped scheming for the presidency from inside the Treasury, and let everyone know he found Lincoln beneath the office. Stanton, a famous attorney who had once literally shoved Lincoln aside on a shared legal case and called him a long-armed ape. Lincoln later handed him the entire war machine as Secretary of War. Asked why he surrounded himself with men who insulted him, his answer was pure frontier arithmetic. These were the strongest men in the country, and the country needed its strongest men. His ego was not a stakeholder. When his general George McClellan kept a president waiting in his own parlor and went to bed, aides seethed. Lincoln said he would hold McClellan's horse if McClellan would only win battles. Read that twice. The man collected humiliations the way he had collected debts, on a ledger to be repaid in results. The war he inherited became the bloodiest in the hemisphere's history, and it shows the same cold patience. Take the most famous document he ever signed. By summer 1862, he had already drafted the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves in the rebelling states. His cabinet talked him out of releasing it. Seward's argument was strategic. Issued amid Union defeats, it would read as a shriek of desperation, the last measure of an exhausted government. So Lincoln put the thunderbolt in a drawer and waited for a victory. He waded through the disasters of that summer, holding a document that would remake the war, until the Battle of Antietam gave him just enough of a win, and then released it from strength 5 days later. The proclamation transformed the war's meaning. Europe could no longer flirt with recognizing the Confederacy without embracing slavery, and by war's end, nearly 200,000 black soldiers had joined the Union Army. Same document, same words, but he understood that a truth's power depends on the hour it is spoken. 15 months later, at a cemetery dedication in Pennsylvania, after the day's great orator spoke for 2 hours, Lincoln delivered 272 words, and the 2 hours have been forgotten ever since. Here is the practice that held the whole machine together, discovered in his papers after his death, the heart letters. When a general threw away a victory, Lincoln would write exactly what he felt, pages of it. After Gettysburg, when General Meade let Lee's beaten army escape across the Potomac and possibly extended the war by years, Lincoln wrote him a letter that still scalds. You were within your easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would have ended the war. My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune. Meade never received it. Lincoln folded it into an envelope marked "Never Sent" and never signed, and put it in a drawer with the others. The anger was real, and it was fully expressed to the one audience that could absorb it without cost: paper. Because the actual question was never whether Lincoln was right to be furious. It was whether firing his fury at Meade would win the war faster, and it would not. It would only cost him a general. In 1864, he expected to lose re-election and wrote a memo pledging cooperation with the victor. Then Atlanta fell, and he won. In his second inaugural, with victory weeks away, the most quoted line offered the enemy not triumph, but mercy, with malice toward none, with charity for all. 6 weeks later, 5 days after the surrender, he was shot at a theater by a man who had heard that speech in the crowd. So what did Lincoln know? Catherine, last time, built belonging she was not born to. Lincoln built something rarer, a working relationship with defeat. Every rival he had was more credentialed, more polished, better funded, and each of them treated a loss as a verdict on themselves and treated their own pride as a fact of state. Lincoln treated losses as tuition and pride as a line item, payable whenever the mission was cheaper without it. That is why he could hire the men who called him an ape, hold the horse of an insolent general, pocket a scalding letter unsent, and shelve his own thunderbolt until the hour it could actually strike. None of that is weakness, every bit of it is aim. The frontier boy with 1 year of schooling outlasted, outhired, and outtimed the most brilliant men of his age, because he was the only one among them who did not need to be told he was winning while he did it. Losing is data, pride is overhead, that is the whole secret, and almost no one can afford to learn it. Next time, a quiet man who found the most dangerous idea in the history of thought, and then sat on it for 20 years, until a single letter from a stranger forced his hand. Charles Darwin. Subscribe and step into the minds that made history.